Hi, everybody. My name is Allyson Morgan, and I am coming to you today from our Doc NYC inaugural Spring Showcase and the team of Framing Britney Spears. I'm so excited to welcome Samantha Stark, Liz Day, and Mary Robertson. Hi, everybody. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you for being here. This is such a fascinating, intimate look, I think, at Britney's life in a way that people haven't seen before. And so let's just start at the beginning. What was the genesis of the project? Samantha, maybe you want to talk a little bit about where this started for you.
Well, the seed starter is Liz Day. So I think Liz Day should take it first.
Sure. So I had long been fascinated by Britney because we're in a similar age range. And I remember her being, just on top of the world when I was in high school, idolized by millions, Miss Perfect, biggest pop star in the world. And then I also remember following her trajectory. And by the time I was in college, she was going through public struggles and was just absolutely hounded by paparazzi and humiliated by the public in a really cruel way. So it felt like her personal story was really powerful of a story to tell. And then also what people may not have known is that for the last 13 years, she's been living under this conservatorship, which is a really extreme legal arrangement supposed to be designed only for people who literally cannot clothe and take care of themselves day to day. Yet she was able to perform in Las Vegas and make millions of dollars. So how can those two things be true? So for both of those layers, it felt like, Britney's story was one that surprisingly hadn't been examined.
You're on mute.
Sure am. I was just going to say there's so much archival material to even begin to dig through. So when you started to think about shaping this story from the beginning of Britney's career through the conservatorship, where do you even begin to start to look for clips and things? And I guess I'll throw that out to the group.
Mm-hmm. I think we just watched and consumed everything we could possibly consume. We had an amazing archival producer, Joanna Schiller. We had a big team. We work pretty differently at the New York Times, where we work as a large group putting things together. And we all just kept watching everything we could find. And the stuff that kind of rose to the top is what ended up in the piece. That was representative. I mean, it was pretty shocking to watch the footage through today's eyes. There were a lot, and there's a lot of fans who really, really love Britney and are really passionate about her. So there were a lot of fan compilations and different pieces of interviews that fans had put online. So it was, we could go through that. We went through, for example, Lynn Spears, Britney's mom, wrote a book. So we went through the book and tried to find moments from the book. And it was just, there was so much, and there was so much that was really painful to watch. We hooked up with this paparazzo, Danny, who's in the film at the very beginning. And he actually had a video camera. He was one of the few people who had video back then. It was mostly photos. So we watched hours and hours of this kind of what it looked like in video and what it sounded like when she was being really stalked. Sorry, just dropped my alarm. It was disturbing to watch everything.
Yeah, I guess I was going to ask that question too. I also grew up in the era of Britney, and I imagine I had one understanding of her life and her career, experiencing her as a pop star, and my experience might be different now through this lens. And so for all of you, did you have a similar experience? What did you find that you were learning as you were going along? And what I guess surprised you, or did you find the most troubling as you were digging through? Mary, do you want to jump in?
Yes, I think that I'll start by saying that we've all been astonished by the reaction to the film, and there are so many parts of the reaction to the film that have been mind-blowing and deeply moving. I would include amongst that the sense that so many who watched it felt this complicity, watched it and said, not defensively, I didn't laugh at those jokes or I didn't do that, but I laughed at those jokes and I did that. I'm starting there because I think that we all had that same experience throughout the process of making the film as well, reaching perhaps slowly and then quickly the total understanding that there were degrees of participation, but we all sort of participated in the culture which facilitated and enabled certain jokes to exist and a certain tone to prevail. Liz, do you want to take it from there?
Sure. Yeah, I personally was not a big fan of Britney's back in the day. And it's funny, I think Sam and I both, a lot of people ask that question and they're surprised by both of us being like, for whatever reason, it felt like I didn't like her. And I don't know whether that was because of jealousy or there was this narrative at the time that she was, just a talentless puppet and, a kitty bopper or whatever. And I think going back and really immersing ourselves in, books about her and just interviews with her, I came away really surprised about how hardworking she was. She was like a pro athlete or a CEO, every night going out on tour and doing interviews. And she earned every cent that she made that ironically she can't control today. But I think in today's lens, you would see people recognizing that, oh, boss babe, lean in, all that kind of stuff. Whereas I don't think she really got credit for that at all.
Mm-hmm. I also would add that I think she presented at the very beginning of the film in that Star Search clip with an extraordinary amount of talent. You hear, you learn in watching that clip that she was born and blessed with this extraordinary voice. And that was something that I wasn't aware of as a, young woman and adult who consumed her music. And it wasn't necessarily front and center in her music, but I think it helps to understand her as someone who was born with extraordinary gifts.
Yeah, I think also, the first thing that I did was do kind of like an unscientific survey of everyone I knew, asking them what's the first thing that pops into your head when you think of Britney Spears. And so many people, the vast majority, said when she shaved her head. And it really got us thinking, like, how much did that one image affect her life? And what was going on outside the frame of that image. The title Framing Britney Spears came at the very beginning of the process because we really wanted to give you journalistic context to the images that you remember and what you had been seeing. We also started interviewing a lot of people about why they loved her, and people close to her immediately, particularly women who hadn't been interviewed before. Most of the interview subjects in archival footage of her talking about her, writing about her, were men, and so we sought out women to see what they would say, and so many of them said, independently, Britney was in control. Even as a teenager, she was business savvy, she was creative, she contributed to her image, she contributed to her performances. And that's something I think the media narrative over time that we all consumed stripped from her, and so it was really surprising also to see that what a rebel she was. Also interviewing a lot of her fans, realizing what outsiders they were, how so many people really related to, her being bullied and bullied for her sexuality. She has so many queer fans, so many fans living with mental illness. And to me, I remember the shaved head, and I had shaved my head when I was in my 20s also. And I remember seeing it and being so confused why that meant she was crazy. And so it was really empowering to re-examine that.
Yeah, it's clear that all of you have a real emotional investment in the story too, or at least in the themes of the story about fame and what fame can do to young women, what media shaping can do to young women. I'm curious, as you were working on it, if you allowed yourself to become emotionally invested in the storytelling, or if you were able to take a step back and just approach it with a journalistic eye, or if there was a little bit of both going on.
great journalism can be deeply empathic, right? Empathic work is not at odds with accuracy necessarily. Yeah. Liz, do you want to take it from there?
Sure. I mean, I think you're trying to do both, right? You're trying to come in with no preconceived notions and try to just look for the facts and, interrogate questions and authority and narratives. So I think that's one layer, but obviously, this is a story about deep emotion. It's a story about complicated family dynamics. It's a story about wealth. It's about being a woman, being a famous woman. It's about control and power. So I'd be lying if I said, emotion wasn't like bleeding through the story, at all moments.
Yeah, I think I was deeply emotionally attached. There was a time period where every night I would have dreams and nightmares about Brittany. I was trapped in her Instagram in like several memorable dreams that I remember. And I think, for two reasons, well, for many reasons, but I think also possibly particularly as women, or at least for me, this is true. I don't hold this kind of like, we are all, if you're a journalist, it means you're totally unbiased and you're a neutral person and none of your past experiences you bring with you to the work. I think it's, better to, and more truthful to acknowledge that, I'm the same age as Brittany. Watching all this footage and thinking about how she was a peer to me and how, myself and all my classmates had watched her get treated this way, like, get belittled, get humiliated, such misogynistic coverage, and what that did to me, because I grew up in that environment and society was telling me that it's okay to treat women like that. And my classmates that it's okay to treat women like that. So I was thought about that a lot, like how what happened to her affected all of us.
I also want to add that we are absolutely and totally committed to accuracy. And we went to great lengths to ensure that everything that we put forth was something that we could stand behind. And this includes the archival material. So there's no clip from TMZ or anything else that's included in the film that we did not verify, that Liz and her team did work to verify. And I think that that's part of how we understand and frame our approach. I'd also add one more thing, which is just that I think we want to and aspire to avoid simple truths or stories that feel too tidy and too easy. And I think certainly what I think we've all learned in compiling this narrative around Brittany's life is that the sort of narrative that emerged around her public unraveling was too simple, and it was on us to complicate it. But we didn't, I think that we approached it with empathy and with rigor, and with a commitment to avoiding all simple truths. So if that simple truth was, overly reductive in any manner, then we wanted to scrutinize and dig deeper.
Yeah. And I guess I did want to ask about Brittany's participation or lack of participation, because I'm sure that was important to you in this process. And I know that you tried to reach out to her and to her family. Other than the Instagram comments that we've seen, have you now heard any reaction from her or her family, her team, or has there still just been a wall of silence there?
So, when people report on Brittany's Instagram as if it is, words coming from her mouth that you're physically in the presence of watching her, it bothers me, because I think that it's different to see, captions on a phone than to like have an interview with somebody. And it's often reported on as if it was an interview with her. I also think and know that enabled by the conservatorship, there's this very tight circle around her. We know from court documents that her conservators are allowed to limit anyone who visits her, and that's not just like physically visits her, but anyone she interacts with, except for her court-appointed attorney, Sam Ingham, who she did not choose to be her attorney. We know that, you know, there's allowed to be security around her 24/7, healthcare people around her 24/7. It's a very, very, very tight circle. And, you know, that's part of the mystery and, you know, what we're examining. But I don't think journalists are getting in touch with Britney, even anonymous sourced journalists.
Yeah, of course. And I know that the conservatorship is still an ongoing process. It seems like there's still a piece of it in play. So how closely are you all monitoring? Do you think that there's going to be another follow-up in your future? Do you intend to keep reporting on the story? Where are things at now?
So we're still very closely invested in Britney's story, and her conservatorship case is still being battled over in court. Her next hearing, or the next hearing in the court case, is on June 23rd, and it's very rare in that Britney is set to speak to the court, which again, you know, has not happened many times in the 13-year-long conservatorship case. So we're going to be following that very closely. We've, you know, just because of time, there was a lot we couldn't include in the first, or in the documentary, that we are still, you know, looking into. And again, would just love to continue talking to people and reporting this story out, because we feel it's really important.
Yeah. I'm also curious, you know, there are folks in the piece, your paparazzi, that seem to have no remorse or don't have a sense of maybe how they contributed to this overall picture of Britney. Have you had any conversations with any of the other subjects since the film was released? Were they able to see it before it was released, or has anyone had a reaction after about how they came across? I guess the question is, are people seeing themselves in a different light given the conversation around the film and how Britney's story was presented? And the answer might be no.
It's hard to say. You know, I don't think that any of us realized how many people would watch this. And I don't think, you know, I've heard from a lot of people who are in the film who say, like, everyone I know from high school is contacting me. It's like, you know, so many people are asking me about this. The two people that we haven't heard from are, or that I haven't heard from, are or Danny, the guy who is a paparazzo, and the Us Weekly photo editor. And I think, you know, they were actually, I think they were brave in coming forward and doing their interview and really speaking their truth. And I think, you know, they both participated, particularly Danny, with the idea that he wanted to help reframe Britney, and he thought there were lots of misconceptions about her. He wanted to talk about it. We interviewed for 4 hours. What's in the piece is very representative of what the 4 hours was. I gave him a lot of opportunities to express remorse because I thought he was going to. And I think in some ways he did. He says, you know, when you're in the moment, you don't know what the person is going through. And he has a lot of positive feelings toward Britney. You know, he talked about how much she loved her kids and wanted to see them. So I do think he contributed to reframing her a lot. And in that way, all the scrutiny landed on him. But no, I haven't talked to him.
And in answer to part of your question, as a practice, we don't share the entirety of the film before broadcast with any of the subjects, but we do go out of our way to talk subjects through their appearance and make sure that they understand, at least through conversation, what they'll hear from themselves and the sort of bent or tilt of the film.
And I think with documentaries, sometimes folks don't realize how long it takes to make, to assemble, to get all of the interviews. Can you just give us a sense of what the scope of the project ultimately was when you started, how long it took to go through interviews and archival? How long did it take to assemble everything?
I mean, I think that how we are making films at the New York Times Presents, which is our anthology documentary series on FX and Hulu, is striking in that we move, as Sam was saying, we work collaboratively. This is a film that is made by a collective in many ways, and that enables us to work fairly quickly. So our film was made in 6 months, give or take, which I think, you know, for those of us that I know that we're speaking to an audience of documentary filmmakers primarily and documentary filmmaking fans, that's really fast for a feature documentary. It's somewhat languid or slow for episodic television, but really, really fast for a 73-minute feature film. And this means, you know, we're able to do this because we have Samantha and Liz's associates working alongside her, and 2 editors who are working at the same time, and story producers who are working alongside them, and an archival producer and her team who are working. And all of this is happening simultaneously. We have editing, we have fact checking, we have in-depth research and reporting, we have storytelling in edit, all happening at the same time. And filming all happening at the same time. It's a gargantuan undertaking. And, you know, I think we're really pleased and proud with our ability to move quickly and to maintain a rigorous approach. And I would say that we're proud of our ability to move quickly because we hope that it means we're able to better meet the moment and achieve the impact that we all aspire to. And hopefully in this case we did.
Was there anything that got left on the cutting room floor that you miss, that you feel like, oh, if we had 15 more minutes, I wish we could have included that interview or that moment? Or do you feel like this is the tightest version of what it is?
So much. Archival alone, I felt like, you know, if we had a DVD extra just of archival moments we could have included. In particular, I am just haunted by this moment in Britney's life, 2 months after she gives birth to her second baby, where the paparazzi take a very graphic upskirt photo of her, and it gets splashed around, you know, the world. And the reaction is not, oh my God, that's extremely invasive and potentially criminal in several states, as it would be today. The conversation was, or the reception of it was kind of like, haha, Britney's a mess, or, you know, whatever. It was like taken as a joke and as, you know, her fault. And I'm just like obsessed with that, because I don't think, you know, we have a lot of conversations around, would this story happen the same way today if, you know, Britney was living this life in 2021. But I think that is one particular moment that would not play out the same.
Yeah. And I guess, you know, there is a theme or a question in the film about a consumer's relationship to media and how we consume it and how we engage with it. And since we all work in media, I'm also wondering if the process of making this film has changed your own relationship to how you consume or produce media in any way.
I'm more cognizant that public figures are humans, you know, that they don't stop feeling in the way that I feel, reacting in the way that I would react.
Yeah, I think something that was so potent in while we were doing this was how mean-spirited the coverage of Britney was. There's, you know, this thing that they used to do where they would confront Britney with mean headlines about her and have her defend herself against them. And I hope that what this is doing, and I think me as someone who makes media, it's such a good reminder that we don't have to be mean-spirited in our coverage, and actually it clouds the truth when you do that. And I also think we really took a step back. You know, so many people believe this narrative that, you know, Britney had a meltdown, she needed someone to take care of her, her father saved her life. Maybe now she's like okay and can be in control again, but she needed someone to take care of her. And we decided just like to erase all of that and start at the beginning and question everything. And that, I think, made it so it was so enlightening. And I think that's a reason that people consumed the film so much. And so it reminds me also as a media maker to do that, to question everything.
Liz, anything to add?
No, I think that was well said.
Okay, I think we're just about out of time, so that's a wonderful place to leave it. I think to continue to encourage everyone to examine your own relationship to media and media culture. I want to thank our team from Framing Britney Spears, Samantha Stark, Mary Robertson, Liz Day. Thank you so much. And to our audience, thanks for joining us, and continue to watch our Doc NYC Spring Showcase and encourage all your friends to do the same. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.